So coming up this weekend, there is no UFC card, but there is going to be a pretty big PFL card taking place in Dubai at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, broadcast on ESPN+. Welcome back to We Want Picks. I'm Artem MMA, and I'm going to break down every single fight that is going to be taking place on this PFL Road to Dubai card. Now, in all honesty, I don't know what PFL Road to Dubai means, but it's something, I guess. And I guess this technically is going to be the final Bellator card that we are going to ever see, as the Bellator Lightweight Championship is on the line in the main event between Usman Numagomedov, who is backed by Khabib, and Paul Hughes, who is backed by Conor McGregor. So a iconic, legendary rivalry at this point, I would say, has kind of been reignited for this PFL card. And aside from that, there is actually some pretty top prospects from Bellator, from other promotions, taking fights on the prelims and the undercard of this event. It should be a pretty good one, and I am genuinely looking forward to this card, especially since there is going to be an absence of UFC this weekend. I am going to get through the card relatively quickly, as I have had a couple really busy days at work, and I am just genuinely quite tired, so I don't think you guys will mind that too much if I do get through the card just a little bit faster than usual. So going off the order that I do have on Tapology, the first fight of the night is going to be between Mostafa, Abada, Rashed, Neda fighting against Haider in what is pretty much a striker versus grappler matchup at middleweight. Rashed Neda, he actually is the current Kung Fu national champion of Saudi Arabia, and it does show in his fights. He actually is a very powerful guy at middleweight, despite being somewhat small for the weight class. Now standing at 5'9", he is a lot shorter than his opponents typically are, but he does make up for it with pretty decent size, and I didn't think that he looked too small at middleweight, maybe aside from his fight against Corey Coupe, as Coupe was a bit bigger than him. But if you do watch his fights, he does have very good takedown defense. He was able to showcase that mostly in this matchup against Alexis Fontes, which of course was 5 years ago now at this point. But in that matchup, he was able to defend every takedown Fontes attempted until Fontes gassed out and he ended up getting the finish. He got a quick finish over Corey Coupe and then was able to follow that up with a win recently for PFL MENA. He fights now against Haider Khan. Haider Khan is a prospect out of the UK. He has, for the most part of his career, not really fought the best level of competition, as if you do go through here, he has really dominated throughout his career, not really against the best opponents. You can watch a few of these matchups on YouTube, but they are somewhat hard to find. And then, of course, he did fight for Anthony Pettis FC, which is on UFC Fight Pass. Recently, he went to war with Robbie Kennedy. I watched that fight. I did think that Haider Khan won because he actually was rocking Kennedy on the feet, which was quite fun to watch. But Kennedy was getting takedowns here and there, even hurt Khan in moments. But to put it like bluntly, the way that Khan fights is he wants the takedown. He wants to grapple. Most of his wins have come so far against guys that just are nowhere near as good at grappling as him. And in this matchup, I think that if he isn't going to get the takedown, I think he's going to be in trouble on the feet. Now, unlike most grapplers that aren't the best strikers, he actually does look quite comfortable in the striking. But I do just worry a little bit about just the fact that he doesn't really have the best striking defense. And when you're taking on a guy that is very accomplished, like Rashed Neda is in just a striking background in general, I do worry that I think Haider Khan is going to be in trouble when it does come to this fight on the feet. So I am going to pick Mostafa Abada Rashed Neda to win this matchup by knockout, probably in the first 2 rounds. He is a slight favorite here, only minus 170 on Bovada right now, minus 200 on my bookie, so the odds seem to be a little bit over the place, but around that minus 200 mark, and Rashed Neda is going to be my pick. Now we have John Mitchell fighting against Souhil Tairi. This is an interesting one because Souhil Tairi has fought for PFL MENA in the past, and John Mitchell has fought for PFL Europe in the past. Now, Souhil Tairi, he did recently go out there and he beat Ahmed Amir. Ahmed Amir is a wrestler that is very one-dimensional and doesn't really have the best striking, and he was able to outstrike Amir in that fight. But then he went out there against Mohsen Mohammed Saifi, who is one of the most fun fighters to watch because he's a 5'5" striker that just somehow managed to strike from range, and he outstruck the 5'11" Tairi for 3 rounds from range. It was quite impressive to watch, but not so good to watch if you're trying to come up with a reason for Tairi to win this matchup as a big underdog. John Mitchell is a wrestler. That is his base. If you watch his earlier fights, he goes out there, he gets takedowns, and he controls on top, and he is very content just not really going out there and trying to find a finish. But recently, his striking has really come along, and he really has just started to implement that striking as part of his game. And I even think in this matchup against Tairi, especially after what I just saw against Mohamed Saifi, I think that John Mitchell could arguably have a striking advantage in this matchup. So I think that Mitchell's going to be pretty safe on the feet, but then he can also wrestle if he wants to. And I think that in that's going to give him more options, and I do think that those options are going to lead to a Mitchell win by decision. John Mitchell's minus 700, very wide on the odds, but I am somewhat confident in Mitchell to go out there and get it done. This is a very wide odds fight that I'm not as confident in. This is Hadi Omar Al-Hussaini, now fighting against Ruel Panales. Ruel Panales, of course, was actually on the road to UFC tournament. His first fight was actually skipped because his opponent missed weight. But he did go out there and he did put on a decent enough performance against Kiru Sahota. Now, he did, of course, lose the fight pretty clearly. He was outstruck 2-1. And he did defend one takedown from Sahota out of 2 attempts, which was good to see, considering when I was actually watching Ruel Panales' fight, it looked like he was a very good striker, but it looked like he just didn't really have any wrestling whatsoever. And I think that actually this matchup against Numagomedov is a pretty decent kind of way to see it, because although Panales looks like the much better striker and he does have a pretty good arsenal with his kicks, it looked like he was struggling a bit in the wrestling against a guy that just didn't really seem to be the best prospect in the world. And then he went out there against Sahota, who can grapple, who can wrestle, and he did defend one takedown, even though Sahota only attempted two attempts. Panales actually attempted 5 takedowns in that fight, which is odd as he is a striker, and I don't really still know how good that wrestling is. And it's going to be tested against Omar Al-Hussaini here, because Hussaini, he is a wrestler. He is going to be nowhere near as good in the striking as Panales. He doesn't look very comfortable. He just pushes forward with his hands very high, almost spaced out like this, and he just throws punches until he can get a takedown attempt off. And he wants to shoot for takedowns over and over and over and over again, and he can get hit. He was knocked down and dominated in the second round in his draw here against Abzak, and then of course in his wins he does go out there and he wrestles. But he's quite small. He's 5'4", going to be slightly smaller than Panales here in the height. But I do just think, just given the style, Hussaini's going to go out there and just wrestle over and over and over again. Hussaini's a big favorite right now. I believe if I just look at the odds right now, he is minus 350. I think to stay away from this fight, if anything, out of all of the big underdogs on the card, I actually think that Panales probably has the best chance to pull off the upset with a knockout. But I am still going to pick Al-Hussaini with a very low confidence pick here. Just avoid it. I think a lot of people will probably look at the price tag and want to parlay Al-Hussaini. I just recommend not doing it, just in case Panales genuinely does have good takedown defense that maybe has been improving recently. Mirafzal Akhtamov is another national champion in striking. He's actually a kickboxing champion, in the national kickboxing champion of the United Arab Emirates, but he's also a hand-to-hand combat national champion in Uzbekistan. So this guy does have good striking, and he is pretty big for the weight class. 5'10", he's not super tall like someone like, you know, Jalen Turner or even like Dan Hooker, but he definitely is a big guy for the weight class, and he actually fought a couple of times recently for the LFA and got a couple big KO wins. This guy here, Keith Dawson, to be honest, didn't really look like he had great striking defense. He wasn't moving his head and eventually just got caught really badly. But then he recently did go out there and he beat Scotty Stockman, and he started that off by hurting Stockman on the feet. Stockman shot for a desperate takedown, and Akhtamov, just given how rocked Stockman was, pulled guillotine in that matchup. He fights against Mike Thompson. Mike Thompson, just kind of like Haider Khan, hasn't really fought the best levels of competition, but you can go out there and you can find a lot of these fights on YouTube. He is very fun to watch, I will admit. But in all honesty, once again, he is going out there and he is just fighting guys that just aren't anywhere near as good as him. And the way that he fights, is he just runs forward with his chin up in the air and he just throws down and he wants to scrap. Very fun fights to watch, but also not really the most high level, and I do worry about the striking defense. Just to correct Tapology, he literally knocked out Rodrigo Mayag in like 20 seconds. It was quite fun. It was quite fun. But I do just kind of worry about the level of competition. I worry about the striking defense of Thompson, and he's now fighting a guy. Although Thompson is listed as 6 foot, he's a pretty thin guy. Like, he's quite small for 155 despite that height. He's fighting a massive, powerful striker, a guy with national championships in striking. I think that Akhtamov is going to go out there. I think he's going to deal with the initial brawl of Thompson, as he's a very patient striker. And I think he's going to time something and end up landing on Thompson and winning by knockout. Akhtamov, I apologize, I've probably been saying his name wrong the whole time, is minus 550 on BetOnline, and Thompson is plus 400. I'm quite confident in Akhtamov to go out there and win by knockout in the first round. This is another fight where the odds are wide and the confidence is low. In fact, I actually don't think the odds are too wide for this one here, because Yakub Sulimanov is minus 225 and Jarrah Hussein Al-Silawi is plus 185. I expect that line to actually close as more and more people go out there and they do their tape study on this fight. Now, once again, I think that the underdog has a very good chance of winning, but I just can't pick Jarrah Hussein Al-Silawi again. Not after last time. Not after last time. I picked him to win against Omar Al-Dafrari, and it turns out that chin really is done. That chin just doesn't exist anymore. It's over. It's just gone. He got knocked out in the first round, and that really kind of confirms it for me. Now, the sad thing about Al-Silawi is this guy was really good. He truly was a fantastic striker, and just kind of an all-round MMA fighter, but I personally considered him as mostly a striker, and he has good wins. He has a win over Abduragimov. This is the Lazy King, by the way. He holds a win over Ismail Nadeyev, who recently come back into the UFC and got a win. He beat Gleison Tibau by split decision, and then it just kind of all went downhill. You know, he lost by KO to a few guys in the PFL. He come back a little bit, looked alright against a short notice opponent, and I believe the PFL wanted Jarrah Hussein Al-Silawi to actually be the face of PFL MENA. I think that they wanted him to be like their guy, you know, kind of like Dakota Chiva was the face of PFL Europe. I think that they wanted him to be the face of PFL MENA, and he got knocked out by the Egyptian Carlos Prates. So, not really too good of a look there, and I just personally think now moving up to 185 pounds, this isn't a good matchup to do it against. Yakub Sulimanov is massive at 185 pounds. He is quite literally built just like Khamzat Chimaev, like genuinely nearly identical, and I was actually watching tape on him, and the first seconds I watched of him, I actually started laughing a little bit because of how much this guy reminded me of Chimaev. So I looked into him, and I believe he's either a training partner of Chimaev or he's a friend of Chimaev, because on his Instagram there's a lot of photos of just Chimaev. But there's also a lot of photos of him and Chimaev like kind of hanging out like outside of the gym. So maybe they're friends, I don't know. But I looked into it, and I'll be brutally honest with you guys. Sulimanov, he's undefeated. He looks pretty good on paper. I just wasn't super impressed by what I saw. In the striking, he's very slow. This guy, Taganbayev, you can watch this fight. It's somewhat hard to find because Sulimanov's surname is spelt so many different ways because of the translation I believe it would have been in. But Tuganbayev was so much quicker than him on the feet. Like, it wasn't even close. And Tuganbayev was able to land pretty big overhands on him, and Sulimanov wasn't even reacting. Even Tuganbayev took him down. But it's in the wrestling that Sulimanov does find most of his success. And although he's so big and he's so slow on the feet, I still think that Al-Silawi, just at this point, I just can't trust his chin. I just can't trust him. It does seem like he's taking a big step back. If Al-Silawi didn't get slept by the Egyptian Carlos Prates, I genuinely probably would pick him here. But I'm going to side with Sulimanov in this matchup. He's just going to be so much bigger than Al-Silawi. Al-Silawi's coming up from 170. That size advantage is going to be big. It's hard to trust Sulimanov to wrestle because he has shown that he just would rather strike in some of his fights. Like, maybe he does think that he is Chimaev, but yeah, I think Sulimanov goes out there. I think he knocks out Al-Silawi, whether that's ground and pound or whether that's on the feet. I don't really know, but I think that yeah, Al-Silawi's best days are behind him, and it's really, really sad to see because I actually was quite high on him at one point. Now we have another fight at middleweight. Tarek Suliman is fighting against Ahmed Sami. This is two wrestlers that just don't have good cardio. And to kind of make it a little bit more interesting, this is actually two wrestlers that at 185 pounds, they're not really in the best shape. Like when you think of a middleweight, like personally, I don't really think of a guy that's just a short heavyweight. That's what both of these guys are. Um, they're both wrestlers. They're both not really the best fighters I've ever seen. But at least Ahmed Sami looks like he knows how to strike. Suleiman, I do worry about that striking a little bit. He does hold a win, of course, against the legendary KB Bulla. But to be honest, in that matchup, Suleiman was taking him down, and then he failed to take down, and he was getting up, and he did have one knee firmly planted on the ground, and Bulla just tried to knock him out with a knee, and yeah, it was a pretty fair DQ. I don't really have much to say about this fight. Just don't bet on it. This is not a fight that I would consider a high level middleweight matchup. I'm going to pick Ahmed Sami because, as I said, I think he is going to have the striking advantage. He's minus 220, so it's not even worth it. It's not like he's an underdog or anything. I'm going to pick Ahmed Sami, and we can now move on to the main card because this is where things get very interesting. Renat Kavalov has now been signed to the PFL. I'm quite sad that the UFC didn't do it because Kavalov has proven time and time and time again that this guy is the real deal. He truly is a genuine prospect in MMA, and he proved it again recently outside of Eagle FC, where he was the champion and defended the belt 4 times. It looks like I've lost internet. That is awkward. Kavalov went out there. He was the Eagle FC champion, which was Khabib's promotion. He defended the belt 4 times. Most of those wins coming over undefeated prospects, which was pretty impressive. And he even showcased striking against Renat Ondar. And these fights can all be found on YouTube. They're actually quite fun to watch, I do think. And against Ondar, he showcased the striking quite a bit because Ondar was showing good takedown defense and showing good striking. But then he goes out there outside of Eagle FC, fights for UAE Warriors, and he fights the Japanese wrestler Hikaru Yoshino. And Hikaru Yoshino was trying to take him down for a pretty large proportion of the first round. Kavalov defended him. In the second round, Kavalov was able to get Yoshino down. And as soon as he took down Yoshino just had no way of getting back up whatsoever, and Kavalov just really showcased the control that he does have when he's in a dominant position, and the ground and pound that he does have when he's in a dominant position, and he was able to land some ground and pound and finish Yoshino in that fight. He fights against the Shuto Brazil champion, so this actually is two, I guess, regional champions fighting against each other. Eagle FC champion versus the Shuto Brazil champion. Clever Fernandez, he's a grappler. He doesn't have any wins by knockout, but he actually has like a pretty fun style to watch because he doesn't shoot takedowns that regularly. The way that he typically fights and goes out there is he comes forward, his hands are up like they are in this photo, and he just boxes, really. He did have a pretty fun fight against a smaller version of Carlos Prates, who also has no wins by KO, I'm pretty sure, and Mauricio Almeida, but Almeida's striking style really reminded me of Carlos Prates, which was quite fun to see. Very much Muay Thai, but ignore that. Against Almeida, the way that he won the fight was he started pretty slow, and he just had good cardio, and Almeida was completely death-gassed in the third round. He literally, with about 3.5 minutes to go in the third round, took a very deep breath, because he was gassed, put his hands on his knees, and Fernandez just landed a big overhand right and knocked him down. That's how tired he was. Eventually got the finish in the 5th round. Pretty fun fight, I will admit, but to be honest with you, I just don't see Fernandez being able to defend any of Kavalov's takedowns. And the thing about Kavalov is he has shown that he can strike against a pretty decent striker in Renat Ondar. And Renat Ondar has gone on to get a couple of decent wins. I believe he now fights for ACA. Renat Kavalov's the pick. I think he wins by KO. I think it probably is going to be due to ground and pound. Fernandez is a good grappler, but I think that Kavalov is just going to be better. And in all honesty, once again, he's minus 2,000. That's $1.05 in decimal odds. It's not worth putting in your parlays, but I do think that Kavalov wins, and I am very much excited to see how he goes against some of the other bantamweights that are signed to PFL. Ibragimov, is now another prospect fighting against Kenny Moknowana. And he is a very talented guy at featherweight. This guy is only 20 years old. He is 15-0 combined between his professional record and his amateur record. And he does fight kind of exactly how you would expect him to fight. He goes out there, he shoots for takedowns, and he controls on top position. And that pretty much is the extent of the fights. I will be honest with you guys, there's not really too much more to go on with that. He is a very athletic guy. He is pretty fast. The striking is okay, but it's nothing too special. The way that he needs to win his fights is in the wrestling. And I think despite Kenny Numagomedov actually being a pretty good prospect himself, a loss to Josh O'Connor does not look bad at all, as Josh O'Connor has now gone on to become 9-0 and has beaten some pretty solid guys himself. And I think Josh O'Connor hopefully is a guy that the UFC's looking at, or maybe PFL themselves, because he is going to be a very good prospect from Wales. But before that, he has beaten not really the best guys, and the way that he did it was with the grappling. The way that I wanted to talk about this matchup though is the way that he lost to Josh O'Connor, because the way that he lost to Josh O'Connor was by getting taken down and not really showing much resistance in those takedown attempts that O'Connor was doing. So now I think that I look at this matchup, you've got a wrestler in Ibragimov who likes to get takedowns, he likes to control on top, taking on a guy who in the past has showcased pretty bad takedown defense. I think that the math checks out. 2 plus 2 does equal 4. I'm going to pick Ibragimov to win this fight by decision by getting the takedowns and controlling in top control. He's minus 500, a big favorite, but I do think he goes out there and gets it done. Now we move up to the underdog of the card, Nathan Kelly versus Ahmed Magomedov. I am picking Nathan Kelly in this matchup. I will be honest with you guys, just kind of going into tape study, I did think that I was going to end up picking Magomedov, because if you do watch Nathan Kelly's fights, it's pretty hard to tell how he's going to look outside of the first round, because he just beats everyone in the first round aside from Damian Nelson. But cross that one out. It's all first round finishes aside from that. And the way that he typically does fight is he fights from range. He's a 6 foot tall. He's not 6 foot tall. I was thinking of someone else. He's 5'8" at 145 pounds, but he must be a tall 5'8", because I swear he's taller than most of his opponents. And he does fight from range quite well. I was thinking of Kenny Moknoana because he was also from Ireland. But anyway, Kelly, he fights from range on the feet, and although not really being the best striker, he does eventually find a way to get the fight down to the ground, whether that is with a takedown, whether that is even with a knockdown in some cases as well. But once the fight does get down to the ground, he has shown a very good grappling ability, and he just goes out there and he just kind of gets quick finishes. Now this win over Vikas Ruel, he knocked Ruel out pretty badly, with an elbow on the break of a clinch against Jose Sanchez. Sanchez was just chasing him, trying to knock him out. It was kind of funny as Kelly was just trying to avoid Sanchez, trying to take his head off. And eventually Sanchez just caught himself in a ninja choke, attempting a takedown, which was just a really odd decision of him. Another thing as well about Nathan Kelly is I think that the PFL really likes this guy. I personally don't know exactly what it is about him that the PFL knows that I don't, because he doesn't have a big online social media following, but he actually did headline this PFL Europe card. I'm pretty confident it was this one, and he wasn't even in a title fight. So the PFL knows something that I don't about Nathan Kelly, but he is a very talented grappler. I would say as well, the win over Shamrock is very good, as Shamrock is now looking pretty good for Octagon. Now to talk about his opponent, Ahmed Magomedov. This is where it's more of a Magomedov fade, to be honest with you, than just a confident straight out Nathan Kelly pick, because Ahmed Magomedov hasn't fought for 2 years now, and he's accepted this fight on short notice. Nathan Kelly was actually meant to fight against Zabit's brother, Kasan Magomed Sharipov, and Magomedov, after fighting for 2 years, he hasn't fought for 2 years, is now stepped up on short notice to take on Kelly. And in that fight, which he lost against Henry Corrales, and I remember picking Magomedov in that fight, and I remember watching it live and just being so disappointed in Magomedov. He went out there and Corrales defended genuinely about 4 takedowns, and Magomedov gassed out and just showcased not really much else on the feet, on the striking. And I don't like the cardio that I saw in that one. I didn't really like the striking that I saw in that one either. And he just hasn't fought for 2 years. I don't really know what else to say. You know, he did beat Gabriel Miranda, who's now in the UFC, and he does have a couple of other good wins, but if he can't get the takedown, what can he do? And you could argue he's going to get the takedown, but now he's going to get takedowns against a grappler and in my opinion, one of the better grapplers, pure grapplers that he's ever fought, maybe aside from Gabriel Miranda, but that was a long time ago now. So I'm going to pick Nathan Kelly. Magomed hasn't fought for 2 years now. He's fought it on short notice. I don't know what this guy's going to look like. I don't know what the cardio is going to look like. I thought he looked pretty small at 145 pounds as well when he was fighting at Bellator, and Kelly's a big guy at 145. So I think that Kelly's going to go out there and get it done. He's my underdog pick of the card. He's plus 190 right now on Bet Online. People will probably just parlay Magomedov because of his surname, so you might even be able to get a crazy price tag on him if you go out there and you watch a couple of fights and you also agree with what I've said. But I'm going to pick Kelly. The public's agreeing with Kelly. I think that Kelly goes out there. I think he wins. I think he wins by submission, and I think he wins by submission in the second or the third round. I think Magomedov could just gas again. We have no idea what this guy's going to look like come fight night. Now we have Vadim Nemkov versus Tim Johnson. If Nemkov loses this fight, I don't know what I will think about MMA anymore. This is a fight which Nemkov should win 10 out of 10 times. Tim Johnson is nearly 40 years old. He's accepted this fight on very short notice because Nemkov has actually gone through multiple different opponent changes. He was meant to fight Corey Anderson, and then he was meant to fight Ante DeLiha, and then finally they've called up Tim Johnson, and Tim Johnson has now accepted the fight. And Tim Johnson as well, you guys may or may not know, was released from Bellator after he beat Said Soma, and then he fought one time for the regional scene, and then was caught up on 2 weeks notice against Danilo Marquez. That was the double knockdown fight when he was kicked in the balls by Marquez, but he also knocked down Marquez at the same time. Marquez was also finding some success as well at the start of that fight, which wasn't really that good to see. And then you watch this fight against Goltsov. Goltsov takes him down pretty much immediately, and it looked like Tim Johnson genuinely had no idea what to do off his back whatsoever, despite having nearly 30 professional fights. And Goltsov took him down, grounded and pounded him out. Johnson had no idea how to stand up. Nemkov should be able to do the same. This guy is the light heavyweight champion of Bellator, defended the belt 4 times. Yes, that was correct off the top of my head there. Defended the belt 4 times, once against old man Yoel Romero, once against Corey Anderson, well, like technically twice, even though Anderson was winning this one. And then before that against a pretty dangerous guy in Anglicus and Phil Davis, which was a good wrestler. Nemkov is good. He's now moved up to heavyweight. He has only fought once at heavyweight. He beat Bruno Capoloza, who's a former PFL champion. I believe he won it all in 2021, the $1 million tournament that no longer exists. Nemkov should go out there against Johnson. He should take him down, and he should finish him in the first round. Now, whether it's by KO or by submission, I don't know, because Nemkov does have both. It probably more than likely is going to be the ground and pound TKO, like what we saw against Goltsov, but I'm going to pick Nemkov. I'm picking Nemkov by round 1 finish. He's minus 1,000. I am more confident in Nemkov than I am in Renat Kavalov. I would be shocked if he lost. Genuinely shocked. So hopefully it doesn't happen. Now we move up to the main event. Usman Numagomedov now fighting against Paul Hughes. This is a really good fight that I genuinely am very excited about. But I do think that Usman Numagomedov is going to win. Now, I think that the world of MMA would get not flipped upside down, but I think it would get like a lot more exciting, I guess you could say, if Paul Hughes was able to pull it off. But I am going to have to side with Usman Numagomedov in this fight. Now, I will say that Paul Hughes has clearly been improving, and he has looked really good under the PFL banner so far. He, of course, was deciding whether he was going to sign with the PFL or if he was going to sign with the UFC. He ultimately chose the money route in the PFL. I believe that was what he said. He got offered more money to fight for the PFL, and he's looked good. Made his debut against Bobby King. Now, Bobby King is an older fighter, but he did go out there and he looked good. He knocked him out in the second round. And then where I was personally most impressed was against AJ McKee Jr. Now, I do think Paul Hughes won this fight. I think pretty much everyone thinks that Paul Hughes won this fight. I think, in fact, some people think that Paul Hughes won all 3 rounds. There's an argument for that. I thought it was 29-28, but, you know, AJ McKee did come back very well after that first round. But to talk about that fight, I was shocked, really, that Hughes looked so good in the takedown defense round. That was personally the reason why I picked McKee to beat him, because I thought that McKee was just going to have a pretty big grappling advantage against him, and he just didn't, really. Paul Hughes was able to defend takedowns, throughout the entirety of the first round. And AJ McKee, to be honest, he either got gassed out from all of the takedown attempts in the first round, or it was a combination of things. It could have been the knees to the body that Hughes was really investing in early. He landed so many knees to the body in the first round, and also knees to the head at the end of the first round, which did lead to the knockdown, the nearly knockout, because he knocked him down with maybe 2 seconds left in the first round. And then he continued to defend the takedowns, and he continued to control the fight on the feet after that against McKee. Very impressive performance. One thing I will say though is McKee is a lot smaller of an opponent to deal with than Usman Nurmagomedov is, because McKee is a former featherweight. He has moved up to 155 and he's been there for a while now, but he still isn't quite like a big lightweight, I guess you could say. And Usman Nurmagomedov, I wouldn't say that he's a big lightweight. Like, I would say Islam Makhachev, for example, is a big lightweight. Usman is 5'11", but he's more of a lanky 5'11", rather than like a really like well-built 5'11" like Islam Makhachev is, because Usman Nurmagomedov, one of the most impressive parts of his game is actually the striking, and especially the kicks. He just is a very athletic guy. He's a very dynamic strike, and he throws a lot of kicks, and he throws a lot of high kicks. A lot of his kicks actually go to the body or to the head, and he just isn't afraid of throwing them because his takedown defense is so good. And I know it was his most recent win. The Alexander Shabalai fight genuinely is just the best example of this. Against Alexander Shabalai, Shabalai just couldn't do anything against him. On the feet, Magomedov was piecing him up from range. And in the wrestling, Shabalai just couldn't get a takedown on him. And then in the third, I think it was the fourth and the fifth, sorry, the later rounds of that fight, that's when Nurmagomedov really started to mount his own offensive wrestling, and he started to control on top position, inside control, landing his own ground and pound, and just controlling from there on out. So of course Nurmagomedov does have very good wrestling, we know this. It's actually the striking of Usman Nurmagomedov that is the most impressive part of his game. And I think that Usman Nurmagomedov, you know, of course Islam Makhachev is there, but I guess like if they were to fight against each other, I think Usman would give Islam a pretty good fight. But of course that will probably never happen, unfortunately. But I do think Usman Nurmagomedov does remain undefeated. I do think he can beat Paul Hughes here. The thing about Paul Hughes, though, is he is going to have a very good chance of knocking him out. Hughes has shown that he does have a lot of power in the hands, and he has gone out there and he has beaten very good guys prior to the PFL signing. Now, this was a short notice replacement, but he absolutely dominated Jordan Vasenik in the rematch. He's got a win over Morgan Charrier, who's now in the UFC, finding decent success, I would say. I just think that Paul Hughes, he has shown that he can box, he can land with big power, and he can defend takedowns against elite wrestlers like AJ McKee Jr. I just think that in the pure wrestling, Usman Nurmagomedov is probably going to be a little bit more better in those wrestling, those takedown attempts. And also, I think that he's going to be a lot bigger, because AJ McKee is a small lightweight in comparison to Usman, if that makes any sense. I'm going to go with Usman. I'm going to go with Usman to win this fight by decision. And I do think that he does defend the belt. But I'm looking forward to it, man. I mean, even Usman Nurmagomedov's career, because how old's Islam Makhachev getting? You know, give it 4 years. Makhachev might have been retired, and then Usman will be in his prime and maybe in the UFC. I mean, Usman Nurmagomedov, a guy to look out for. I'm pretty high on him. I think he's very good. Now, Hughes does have a good chance, which is why I am not like super confident in Usman. But I do think that Usman's a very talented fighter. So I'm going to pick Usman here. Minus 425 on Bet Online, but the odds are kind of all over the place because he's minus 600 on Betway. You've got to pay the Nurmagomedov tax here. I personally just don't think it's worth betting on him unless like you're really confident he can maybe find a finish, or you want to jump on the underdog and Paul Hughes. But yeah, I think that Usman's the pick. Well, Usman is the pick. I don't think he's the pick. And that's it for the video. So let me know what you think in the comments below. That's my PFL breakdown for the first PFL card of the year. I'm very interested in general about how the PFL is going to look in the future, because they've changed the tournament format, which personally, I love it. I really do. I really liked Bellator's tournament format, so I'm very happy that they have gone and done that themselves. That's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.